They fired me like I was a name tag they could peel off and throw in a drawer. 8 years of loyalty, 12-hour days, and weekends lost to deadlines. And in the end, they didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye when they did it. Before we dive in, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. I arrived early. My name's Matt Dawson. I'm 42, born and raised in Ohio, and until last year, I was the kind of guy who kept his head down and played by the rules. College degree, stable job, mortgage, 2 kids, 1 dog. I thought I was doing everything right. I wasn't flashy, but I showed up early, left late, and made sure the gears kept turning, even when everyone else clocked out. I wasn't looking to climb over anyone. I just wanted to build a life I could be proud of. But one Tuesday morning, they called me into the glass box we called the collaboration room, which, let's be honest, was just where bad news lived. I knew something was off the second I saw Garrett sitting there with his arms crossed, pretending to scroll his phone. Across from him was Shelley from HR, and next to her, some lawyer I'd never seen before, with a thin folder and a practiced expression. I sat down. I already knew what was coming. "Matt," Garrett said, his voice like a voicemail left at 1% battery. "There have been some tough decisions. Your role, it's being phased out." Just like that. No thank you. No acknowledgement of the extra hours I worked when Garrett bailed early for his kids' soccer games. No mention of the project I salvaged when he forgot to follow up with a client. I was already being erased. Shelley talked severance, the lawyer read some legalese, and Garrett couldn't even fake eye contact. They walked me out before lunch. I wasn't allowed back at my desk. An intern packed my things into a cardboard box. I stood at the curb with that box in my arms, watching Garrett through the lobby glass, already back on his phone, already moving on. My wife, Erin, took it better than I did. She always does. "We'll get through it," she said, pulling me into a hug that almost made me believe it. But at night, when the kids were asleep, I'd catch her staring at the budget spreadsheet, biting her lip. I started job hunting the next morning, polished the resume, rewrote my cover letter 10 different ways, sent out applications like clockwork. But the silence was brutal. A few interviews, some hopeful nods, then the emails. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." Every time it felt like I was disappearing a little more, but something inside me had shifted. There was this anger I couldn't shake, a bitter clarity. Garrett didn't just fire me, he used me. I trained the guy who replaced me, left behind systems I built from scratch, and he kept all the credit. I thought I'd lost everything. But then I passed a crumbling warehouse on 7th and King, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. Leverage. The warehouse didn't look like much. Red brick, half-faded graffiti, cracked windows covered in plywood. You could have driven past it 100 times without noticing. But I noticed it that day. Maybe because I was finally desperate enough to see things other people ignored. The sign on the rusted gate read, "For sale by owner." No flashy brokerage logo. Just a phone number, handwritten in permanent marker, weathered and curling at the corners. Something about it felt unfinished, like potential trapped under dust. I called the number. An older guy named Carl picked up, said the place used to be a machine shop his dad ran back in the 70s. He hadn't been able to lease it out since the pandemic hit. "I'm tired," he said. "I just want it gone." We met 2 days later. He didn't try to sell me on anything, just handed me a ring of keys, shrugged, and said, "If you want to look around, help yourself." Inside, it smelled like oil and rain-soaked concrete, but the bones were good. High ceilings, solid structure, a freight elevator that still worked. My brain, burned out from months of rejection, suddenly clicked into a different gear. The space could be converted. Studios, co-working, light industrial, maybe even a startup hub, I had no real estate experience, but I knew what downtown rents looked like. And I knew how much square footage was rotting away right here. I went home with a strange sense of purpose. Erin was skeptical, but she saw the light in my eyes. We cashed out an old 401k I'd almost forgotten about. Took out a second mortgage on the house. It was a risk, maybe the biggest of our lives. But something in me had snapped the day Garrett fired me. I wasn't going to spend the next decade waiting for someone else to sign my paycheck. I wanted control. I closed on the building 3 weeks later. The rehab wasn't glamorous. I painted walls, installed lights, replaced floor panels. I learned plumbing fixes from YouTube and figured out how to pull permits by reading every line of city code. I worked 12-hour days, slept with a notebook by the bed, and woke up sore but wired. Some nights Erin would come by with dinner, and we'd eat sitting on overturned buckets, laughing like we were 20 again. After 6 months, the space was ready. I branded it The Forge, a nod to what it had once been. We opened 10 industrial-style studio units, designers, furniture makers, a small batch coffee roaster, people looking for space they could afford. I kept the rent below market to fill it fast, and word spread quick. Within a month, I had a waiting list. The place turned profitable faster than I expected. And then, something strange happened. One of the new tenants knocked on my door with a proposal, said their old office lease fell through and they needed short-term space for their team. Sent me the company name that night. It was Garrett's new startup. When I read the company name in that email, Red Ridge Analytics, I had to reread it 3 times to be sure. It wasn't some coincidence. Garrett had finally jumped ship from my old employer, just like I figured he would. Probably cashed out his stock options, found a few backers, slapped a modern-sounding name on a recycled idea, and decided he was going to be a tech founder now. Typical Garrett. Fail upward, always. But here's the twist. He had no idea who owned the Forge. I never put my name on the public-facing materials. I set up an LLC, Dawson Properties, nice and boring, and kept myself behind the scenes. On paper, I was just another faceless landlord, which meant Garrett, that smug son of a bitch, was about to rent space in my building. From me. At first, I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to reject them outright, maybe send back a snide, "Sorry, we're full," just to savor the irony. But then I thought about it a little longer. What would hurt more? A rejection? Or letting him walk through those doors, completely unaware, thinking he was in control again, while I held the keys? So I said yes. They signed a 6-month lease. Nothing big, just 2 units, open floor, minimal build-out. I made sure the rent was fair, but slightly above market. He didn't even blink. I watched through the security cameras the day his team moved in. Boxes, monitors, folding desks. Garrett strolled in like he owned the place, barking orders on a call, barely glancing around. And I just sat there in the office upstairs, coffee in hand, watching the whole thing unfold. I wish I could say it felt triumphant, like something out of a movie. But honestly, it felt quiet. Still, just a deep, satisfying calm. After all those months of stress and doubt, here he was, inside my building, paying me rent, totally unaware. It was poetic. He thought he'd thrown me out. But I'd only moved up. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance. Let them settle in. My property manager handled day-to-day issues, and I stayed focused on the rest of the building. We were expanding, turning the back bay into event space, planning a rooftop lounge. But I kept an eye on Garrett's company. I couldn't help myself. And then the rumors started. Late payments to vendors, high turnover, investors getting skittish. Garrett had bitten off more than he could chew. Again? Only this time there wasn't a corporate net to catch him. I knew that panic. I'd felt it in my gut after he fired me, but now it was his turn. And the best part? Every month he kept struggling to make payroll, I still got paid first. Because before anything else, the landlord always gets paid. 3 months into Garrett's lease, I finally saw him in the hallway. I'd come down to meet a contractor about some plumbing in the back unit. Garrett stepped out of his space, phone in hand, frustration painted across his face. He didn't recognize me at first. That's the thing about guys like him. They don't remember the people they step on. I'd put on some weight since leaving the corporate grind, grew a beard, traded slacks for work boots and a flannel shirt. But when our eyes locked, there was a flicker, something behind the confusion, a memory scratching its way to the surface. "Matt?" he said, almost hesitant. "Matt Dawson?" I smiled, just a little. "Hey, Garrett." He blinked like I'd come back from the dead. "Wow, man, it's been, what, a year?" He gave a weak laugh, glanced around. "Didn't know you were working here." I just nodded. "Yeah, you could say that." He didn't ask more. Guys like him never do, not when the math doesn't add up in their head. I could see it messing with him. Why was I here, walking around like I owned the place? Because I did. Why wasn't I desperate, begging for a favor, still licking my wounds from the firing he orchestrated? He didn't know how to process it. That was the best part. He backed away with a polite smile, said something about catching up soon, and disappeared into his unit. I didn't see him for another week, but I started noticing the signs of stress. More arguments through the thin walls, fewer team members coming in. The espresso machine they brought on day one? Gone. Probably sold. One night I stayed late to meet a locksmith. Tenant had jammed their front door. As I walked past Garrett's unit, I saw him alone at his desk, head in his hands, phone glowing beside him. I stood there a second, unseen. And I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. Because I remembered every time he ignored my ideas in meetings, only to pitch them weeks later as his own. I remembered how he had me run numbers all weekend for a project he never even submitted, just to keep me occupied. I remembered the cold way he slid that folder across the table, knowing I had a family, a mortgage, and nothing lined up. This wasn't revenge, it was gravity catching up. By the end of month 4, rent was late. My property manager sent the first warning. By month 5, they were a full 30 days past due. Garrett emailed us directly, asking for flexibility, said they were in between rounds of funding, that things were just a bit tight right now. I read that email 3 times, then sat back and laughed in my office. The man who once decided I wasn't worth the cost of keeping was now asking me for mercy. I gave him a 10-day notice to pay or vacate. Business is business. 10 days came and went. No payment, no update. Just silence. Garrett didn't respond to follow-ups, and I wasn't about to chase him. I'd played the begging game once, months ago, when I was out of work, sending resumes into black holes. I knew what silence felt like from the other side. Now it was his turn to sit in it. The formal eviction process started the following week. My attorney drafted the notice, and we delivered it by hand, standard procedure. I wasn't there when Garrett got it, but I heard from my property manager that he tried to argue, said he'd talk to the owner personally. That made me smile. He still didn't realize I was the owner. A few days later, I finally ran into him again. He was waiting in the lobby when I came in for a morning meeting. He looked thinner, hollow-eyed. Stress clung to him like sweat. "Matt," he said, voice low. "Can we talk?" I gave him 5 minutes. We sat in the common area. Cheap couches, the smell of burnt coffee lingering from one of the other tenants. He told me he was close to securing bridge funding. Said if I could give him just 2 more weeks, he could make everything right. That he had a plan. He used the same tone I remembered from meetings, calculated charm, with just a splash of desperation, like a politician on a sinking campaign. I looked him dead in the eye. "You remember what you said to me the day you let me go?" His face twitched. "Matt, that was just... You said it wasn't personal, that it was just business. Remember that?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stood up. "So is this." I walked out. A few days later, his team started packing. Quietly. Cardboard boxes, monitors wrapped in blankets, chairs rolled out through the loading dock. No big announcement, no dramatic finale, just the slow collapse of something built on ego and borrowed money. Garrett came in early one morning, spent 3 hours alone in the unit, then left. I never saw him come back. The space sat empty for a week. Then I listed it again. Had 3 offers within 48 hours. That's the thing about solid properties in a growing city. There's always someone looking to move in. The new tenant was a local architecture firm. Paid 6 months up front. Never missed a call. One evening, I walked through the old unit alone. Garrett's ghost still lingered in the scuff marks on the wall, the faint outline of desks on the floor. But there was no bitterness in me. Just clarity. He took a shot at my livelihood and lost. I hadn't ruined him. He did that himself. All I'd done was give him a place to crash on the way down, and charged him market rate for it. I didn't celebrate when Garrett left. There was no champagne, no victory lap, just a quiet morning, sun spilling through the tall warehouse windows, and the knowledge that I'd built something solid after being left with nothing. That was enough. Some nights, after locking up, I walk the halls of the forge and listen. Not to the noise. Most of the tenants have gone home by then, but to the feeling of the place. There's a hum to it now. People building things. People chasing something real. It's not just a building anymore. It's a second chance. Mine and everyone else's who took a chance on it. Aaron says I've changed. I'm still me, but lighter. More sure of myself. I think it's because, for the first time, I don't wake up wondering if someone else is going to decide my worth. I own my time now, my mistakes, my wins, all of it. Funny how things work out. Garrett probably still doesn't know I was the landlord. Maybe he never will. Maybe he's too busy pitching his next idea to another round of investors. I don't care. I don't need revenge stories or viral posts or courtroom drama. I got what I needed. Freedom. Dignity. The long game. A few weeks ago, my oldest son asked me why I quit my job. He's only 10, but he sees more than I give him credit for. I didn't go into the full story. I just told him I didn't quit. I got let go, and then I made something better. He thought about that and nodded. "So, you got fired, but now you're the boss?" I smiled. "Something like that." He grinned and went back to his Legos, building a tower so tall it started to lean. And I watched him, thinking how proud I was that he could see that sometimes, getting knocked down is the best thing that can happen to you. Because if you're willing to start from the floor, you might just find the foundation you needed all along. So yeah, my boss fired me. But now, he's long gone. And I'm still here, collecting rent,